As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Lucky Luciano could have eaten anywhere in New York. He chose the same restaurants on Mulberry Street where the cook was somebody's mother from Campania, and the waiter never bothered with a menu. The most feared men in 1930s Little Italy did not eat differently from anyone else on the block. They ate what their mothers made, what their neighbors made, what the whole neighborhood made from the same ingredients that came over on the boats from Naples and Palermo and the hills of Calabria. Wait until you get to number 18. Because that dish separated the real Italians from everyone else on the street. The one at number 7 showed up at every card game south of Houston Street, and number 4 was not the version you grew up with. Hit subscribe because here are 25 foods Italian mobsters really ate in 1930s Little Italy. Number 25, pork chops with vinegar peppers. A thick pork chop fried hard in olive oil was already a solid meal in 1930s Little Italy. What turned it into a neighborhood staple was the vinegar peppers piled on top. Long Italian frying peppers, sliced and cooked in a pan with garlic and a generous splash of red wine vinegar until they softened and the vinegar reduced into something sharp and sweet at the same time. The chop got seared on both sides until the fat at the edge crisped and browned. Then the peppers went right on top while everything was still sizzling. The vinegar cut through the richness of the pork and made the whole plate taste brighter than it had any right to. Butchers on Mott Street sold the chops bone in, and the bone was the best part because you could pick it up and get the last of the meat and pepper juice off it with your teeth. Nobody used a knife for that part. Number 24. Polenta. Before pasta ruled the Italian-American table, there was polenta. Coarse cornmeal stirred in a heavy pot for the better part of an hour until it thickened into something you could slice with a string. In the mountains of northern Italy, polenta was survival food. In 1930s Little Italy, it kept showing up because it cost next to nothing and filled a family of 6 on a handful of ingredients. Some families poured leftover Sunday gravy over it. Others fried slices in a pan the next morning and ate them with coffee. The Sicilians mostly ignored it. The Neapolitans tolerated it. The families from the Veneto and Friuli could not live without it. What mattered was that a 5-pound sack of cornmeal lasted a week and kept everyone quiet until dinner. Number 23. Pasta e ceci. Pasta with chickpeas sat somewhere between a soup and a stew and never bothered to pick a side. Dried chickpeas soaked overnight, then simmered with garlic, a sprig of rosemary, and a piece of pork rind until they turned soft and the broth thickened from the starch. A small pasta, usually broken spaghetti or ditalini, went into the pot to cook directly in the liquid so it absorbed everything. Families from Campania stirred in a spoonful of tomato. Families from Puglia left it white and finished it with a drizzle of olive oil and cracked black pepper. The result was heavy, starchy, and deeply filling. The kind of meal that could anchor a cold night when the radiator was not working and the kitchen stove doubled as the only heat source in the apartment. Number 22. Giambotta. Giambotta was what happened when the garden came in all at once and nothing could go to waste. Zucchini, peppers, eggplant, tomatoes, onions, potatoes, all cut into rough chunks and cooked together in a heavy pot with olive oil and garlic until everything collapsed into something that was no longer any single vegetable. Some families dropped in a piece of sausage, others kept it strictly vegetables because that was all they had. There was no fixed recipe because the whole point was to use whatever was sitting on the counter before it turned. Every province in southern Italy had its own name for it and its own opinion about what belonged in the pot. In Little Italy, it showed up in the late summer months when the push carts on Mott Street overflowed with produce and prices dropped to almost nothing. You ate it with bread. You ate it cold the next morning. You ate it 3 days in a row if that was what the kitchen produced. Number 21. Scungilli salad. Scungilli was conch, and it was the kind of food that separated the people who grew up in an Italian neighborhood from the people who merely visited one. The conch meat came from the fish markets on the Lower East Side, tough and rubbery, and requiring a beating with a mallet before it became anything worth putting in your mouth. Once tenderized, it was sliced thin and tossed with lemon juice, olive oil, garlic, celery, and a scattering of black olives. The salad was cold, bright, and chewy in a way that demanded your attention. It appeared at Christmas Eve dinners as part of the Feast of the Seven Fishes. But in 1930s Little Italy, it showed up year-round at the seafood counters and in the back rooms of the social clubs where men played cards on Saturday afternoons. The preparation took patience. The conch had to be cleaned, boiled until it softened but still had bite, then sliced against the grain. Too long in the pot and it turned to rubber. Not long enough, and you could not chew through it. The women who made it well had a feel for the timing that came from years of doing it, not from any written instruction. In the restaurants on Mulberry Street where the connected men ate their long meals, scungilli showed up on the table without being ordered, alongside marinated artichokes and roasted peppers and slices of sharp provolone. It was part of the antipasto spread that arrived before anyone discussed business, and it stayed on the table until the espresso came out. If you could not handle the texture, you reached for the olives instead, and nobody mentioned it. But the men who ate scungilli without flinching earned a kind of quiet respect that had nothing to do with money or territory. Number 20. Eggplant Parmigiana. Thick slices of eggplant, salted and drained for an hour to pull out the bitterness, then dredged in flour and egg and fried in olive oil until the edges crisped and the inside went soft. Layered in a baking dish with tomato sauce and slices of fresh mozzarella, then baked until the cheese melted and browned. In the 1930s, eggplant was cheap and abundant at the Italian markets on Mott and Mulberry Streets, and the dish became a standard on Fridays when Catholic families in Little Italy observed the no-meat rule. It proved you did not need meat to make something that felt like a feast. It was heavy, rich, and satisfying in a way that made you forget the eggplant was doing all the work. Number 19. Fried smelt. Smelt were small, silver fish no longer than a finger. And in 1930s Little Italy they arrived at the fish markets by the crate. They cost next to nothing because most people outside the Italian and Greek neighborhoods had no interest in a fish you ate whole, bones and all. Italian families dredged them in seasoned flour and fried them in olive oil until the tails turned crispy and the skin blistered and crackled. A squeeze of lemon, a sprinkle of coarse salt, and they went straight from the pan to the plate. Children ate them like snacks, picking them up by the tail and biting through in 2 bites. On Friday nights, when the no-meat rule in Catholic households specifically meant fish, platters of fried smelt covered kitchen tables across the neighborhood and disappeared before anyone had time to sit down. Number 18. Tripe. Tripe was the dividing line. If you could eat it, you belonged. If you could not, nobody held it against you, but they remembered. Tripe is the lining of a cow's stomach, and in 1930s Little Italy it showed up braised in tomato sauce with onions, garlic, and a shower of grated pecorino romano. It had a texture that took getting used to. Chewy, slightly rubbery, with a give that no other cut of meat came close to. Butchers in the neighborhood sold it for pennies because most Americans outside the Italian community wanted nothing to do with it. The smell while it cooked was strong, unmistakable, and it divided opinion even within the family. But the men who sat in the social clubs on Mulberry Street and the side streets off Hester ate it without hesitation, because turning down tripe meant you had forgotten where you came from. Number 17. Broccoli rabe with sausage. Broccoli rabe was one of those vegetables that nobody outside of southern Italy understood in the 1930s. It was bitter, leafy, and looked like something you would pull out of an overgrown garden. Italian families in Little Italy knew what to do with it. They blanched it in salted water, then sautéed it in olive oil with garlic and dried red pepper until the bitterness mellowed into something sharp and green and deeply savory. Paired with crumbled Italian sausage, it became a complete meal that needed nothing else except a piece of bread on the side. The combination showed up in kitchens all over the neighborhood, and in the Italian groceries that sold both ingredients side by side, because the pairing was so automatic that buying one without the other felt incomplete. The thing about food in 1930s Little Italy was that it carried weight beyond the plate. A man who ran numbers for the Lucchese family sat down to the same bowl of tripe as the bricklayer 2 floors up. The grocery stores on Mott Street did not have a separate aisle for connected men. Everyone bought from the same pushcarts, haggled with the same vendors, and carried the same string-tied packages up the same narrow staircases. What you ate told people where your family came from in Italy. It never told them what you did for a living. Number 16. Mozzarella in carrozza. The name means mozzarella in a carriage, and the carriage was 2 slices of bread. Fresh mozzarella sandwiched between day-old Italian bread, dipped in beaten egg and fried in olive oil until the outside turned golden and the cheese inside stretched and pulled when you broke it apart. In 1930s Little Italy, fresh mozzarella was made daily in the Lattery on Mott Street, and it was cheap enough to use for a fried sandwich. The dish was fast, filling, and used up bread that was too stale to eat on its own, but too good to throw away. Children came home to it in the afternoon. Adults ate it as a late-night meal after work. The crust shattered when you bit into it, and the cheese inside was still warm enough to burn your tongue. Number 15. Arancini. Arancini were fried rice balls, and they were a Sicilian invention that traveled to Little Italy with the wave of immigrants from Palermo and Catania. Leftover risotto mixed with a beaten egg, wrapped around a small cube of mozzarella or a spoonful of meat ragu, then rolled in breadcrumbs and fried in hot oil until the outside crackled and the cheese inside melted into a pocket of warm, stretchy filling. Street vendors sold them on Mulberry Street wrapped in brown paper. Social clubs kept trays of them on the counter during card games. The beauty of arancini was that they solved 2 problems at once. They used up leftover rice and turned it into something portable and satisfying. The Sicilian families guarded their filling ratios. The Neapolitan families pretended not to care. Everyone ate them. Number 14. Braciole. Braciole was the dish that took the longest to make and lasted the shortest at the table. A thin cut of beef, usually top round, pounded flat with a mallet until it was almost translucent. Then the filling, a layer of breadcrumbs mixed with garlic, pecorino romano, parsley, and sometimes pine nuts and raisins, depending on which province the family traced back to. The whole thing was rolled tight, tied with butcher's twine, and browned in olive oil before going into the Sunday gravy pot to braise for hours. The trick was in the pounding. Too thick, and the beef would not roll properly. Too thin, and it fell apart in the pot. Grandmothers who had been making braciole since they were teenagers in Calabria or Campania could pound a piece of beef to the exact thickness by sound alone. The mallet hit the cutting board with a rhythm that carried through the apartment walls, and if you grew up in a tenement on Mott Street, you knew what that sound meant before you opened your eyes on a Sunday morning. When the braciole came out of the gravy pot, it was sliced crosswise so you could see the spiral of filling inside. The meat had absorbed hours of tomato and pork fat and garlic, and the breadcrumb filling had turned dense and savory. It was served on the same platter as the meatballs and sausages, but it sat at the top because everyone at the table understood that braciole required the most skill and the most patience. In the social clubs along Mulberry Street, a well-made braciole earned the kind of quiet respect that had nothing to do with money. Number 13. Fried calzone. A calzone in 1930s. Little Italy was not the baked, restaurant-sized pillow it became later. It was smaller, fried in oil, and stuffed with whatever the kitchen had on hand. Ricotta and mozzarella, sautéed greens, leftover sausage. The dough was the same as pizza dough, stretched thin, filled, folded in half, and sealed by pressing the edges with a fork before it went into a pan of hot olive oil. The outside fried to a deep golden brown, blistered and slightly charred in spots, while the inside stayed soft and steaming. Bakeries on Grand Street sold them in the morning alongside bread and sfogliatelle. Street vendors carried them in metal boxes lined with cloth to keep them warm. They were portable, cheap, and dense enough to work as a full meal on their own. Number 12. Spiedini. Spiedini were thin slices of beef rolled around a filling of breadcrumbs, garlic, grated pecorino romano, and parsley, threaded onto wooden skewers, and fried or grilled until the outside browned and the filling inside turned golden. The name meant little skewers, and the dish came over from Sicily and the southern mainland where street vendors cooked them over charcoal on the sidewalk. In Little Italy, they were made at home and served as a main course or sliced from the skewer and eaten with a piece of bread. The beef was pounded thin enough to roll without tearing, and the breadcrumb filling held everything together while stretching a small amount of meat into a full meal. Some families layered bay leaves and pieces of onion between the rolls on the skewer, which added a smoky sweetness as they cooked. Spiedini looked more impressive than the ingredients suggested, which in Depression-era Little Italy was exactly the point. Number 11. Sfogliatelle. Sfogliatelle were layered pastries from Naples, shaped like seashells, filled with a mixture of sweetened ricotta, semolina, and candied citrus peel. Making them at home was an ordeal. The dough had to be stretched paper thin, brushed with lard, and rolled into a cylinder before being cut and shaped by hand. Most families in Little Italy did not bother. They bought them from the Italian bakeries on Grand Street and Mulberry Street, where bakers who had learned the craft in Naples turned them out by the hundreds every morning. The outside shattered into flaky, crisp layers when you bit into it, and the filling was warm and creamy and faintly sweet. They were eaten with espresso in the morning or after Sunday dinner with a cup of strong coffee. Number 10. Taralli. Taralli were hard, ring-shaped biscuits baked until they turned dry and crunchy, flavored with cracked black pepper or fennel seed or sometimes both. They came from Puglia and Campania and traveled to Little Italy in the luggage of immigrants who needed something that would survive the ocean crossing without spoiling. Italian bakeries on Grand Street sold them loose from wooden bins, and families kept a bag on the kitchen table the way other households kept a bowl of crackers. They went with wine, with a slice of provolone, with a smear of lard, or with nothing at all. Taralli were the thing you reached for when you were not hungry enough for a full meal, but needed something to hold in your hand while you talked. In the social clubs, they sat in bowls next to the lupini beans, and nobody ever remembered who put them there. Number 9. Veal cutlet parmigiana. The difference between a good Italian cook and an ordinary one showed up in the veal parmigiana. The veal had to be cut thin, pounded thinner, and the breading had to be done in stages. Flour first, then beaten egg, then fine breadcrumbs seasoned with nothing more than salt and a little grated cheese. The cutlet went into a pan of olive oil heated to exactly the right temperature. Too cool, and the breadcrumbs absorbed oil and turned soggy. Too hot, and the outside burned before the veal cooked through. In the 1930s, veal was not the expensive cut it became in later decades. Italian butchers in Little Italy sold it at prices that working families could manage, especially the thinner cuts from the leg that were ideal for pounding flat. A single cutlet, breaded and fried and topped with tomato sauce and a slice of fresh mozzarella melted under a broiler, could stretch into a meal when served alongside a plate of spaghetti. The Italian restaurants on Mulberry Street that catered to both the neighborhood and the occasional outside visitor all had veal parmigiana on the menu. It was the dish that customers who did not speak Italian could point to on a handwritten board and know they would get something good. The men who ran the neighborhood ate it in the back rooms of those same restaurants, at tables where the check never arrived and the waiter knew not to rush the meal. Veal parmigiana was comfort food and status food at the same time, depending entirely on who was holding the fork. The restaurants of 1930s. Little Italy served two purposes. In the front room, families celebrated birthdays and first communions and visiting relatives from the old country. In the back room, different conversations took place, quieter ones, where the wine kept coming and the food arrived without anyone ordering it. The same cook made both meals. The same hands rolled the same pasta. The food did not change depending on who was eating it. Only the conversation changed, and the door stayed closed. Number 8. Italian wedding soup. Despite the name, Italian wedding soup had nothing to do with weddings. The name came from the Italian phrase minestra maritata, which meant married soup, referring to the marriage of meat and greens in the broth. In 1930s Little Italy, the soup was a clear chicken broth loaded with tiny meatballs made from a mixture of ground beef and pork, rolled no bigger than a marble, along with escarole or spinach and small pasta like acini di pepe. The meatballs were the part that took the most time. Each one was rolled by hand, dozens of them, sometimes more than 100 for a large pot, and every family had a slightly different ratio of meat to breadcrumb to egg. The soup was light but filling, served in deep bowls with grated cheese on top and a thick slice of bread on the side. Number 7. Lupini beans. Lupini beans were the bar snack of 1930s Little Italy. They showed up in bowls on the tables of social clubs, on the counters of salumeri, and at every card game played in every back room south of Houston Street. The beans were large, flat, and bright yellow, brined in salt water for days until they lost their natural bitterness and became tender and faintly salty. You ate them by pinching the skin between your thumb and finger and squeezing the bean into your mouth. The skins piled up on the table like evidence of a long afternoon. Nobody served them on a plate. Nobody ate them with a fork. They were finger food, conversation food, the thing you reached for without looking while somebody else was talking. In every Italian grocery in the neighborhood, jars of lupini sat next to the olives and the marinated artichokes. Number 6. Cannoli. A proper cannoli in 1930s. Little Italy was not the oversized pre-filled tube that showed up in bakeries decades later. The shell was fried to order, thin and crisp, with small blisters on the surface from the hot oil. The filling was sweetened ricotta, drained overnight so it was dense and dry rather than wet, mixed with small pieces of candied citrus and sometimes a few chocolate chips. The ends were dipped in chopped pistachios. Bakeries on Grand Street filled them only when a customer was ready to buy, because a shell that sat in ricotta for more than an hour turned soft and lost its crunch. That detail mattered. A soggy cannoli was an insult to the baker and a disappointment to everyone else. The best ones cracked when you bit into them, and the ricotta inside held its shape on your tongue. Number 5. Mortadella and provolone on a seeded roll. This was not a sandwich that appeared on any menu. It was the sandwich that Italian men in Little Italy carried to work in brown paper bags and ate sitting on steel beams and scaffolding across the city. Thick slices of mortadella with visible pockets of fat and whole peppercorns, layered with sharp provolone on a seeded Italian roll. No lettuce, no tomato, no condiments except maybe a drizzle of olive oil and a shake of dried oregano. The salumeri on Mott and Grand Streets assembled them by the dozen in the early morning hours before the work crews headed out. The bread was baked that day. The mortadella was sliced to order from a log that hung behind the counter. A working man could eat 1 by 10 in the morning and keep going until dinner without stopping again. Number 4. Spaghetti and meatballs. The version of spaghetti and meatballs that the rest of America came to know bore almost no resemblance to what Italian families in Little Italy put on the table in the 1930s. The meatballs were not tennis ball-sized orbs drowning in jarred marinara. They were small, dense, and made with a mixture of ground beef, ground pork, stale bread soaked in milk, egg, garlic, parsley, and grated pecorino romano. The bread was the key. It kept the meatballs tender and stretched the meat further, which mattered when you were feeding 6 people on a pound of ground beef. They were browned first in olive oil, then dropped into the gravy pot to simmer for hours alongside the sausages and the braciole. By the time they came out, they had absorbed enough tomato and pork fat to taste like something far more expensive than what they cost to make. The spaghetti itself was cooked in a massive pot of salted water and drained when it still had a firmness that would later come to be called al dente, though nobody in 1930s Little Italy used that term. They just knew when it was done by feel. Every family made them. Every restaurant served them. The social clubs on Mulberry Street kept pots of gravy with meatballs going on weekend afternoons, and the men who controlled the neighborhood ate them at the same scratched tables where they divided territory and settled accounts. There was no version of Little Italy without spaghetti and meatballs. The dish was the neighborhood itself, reduced to a single plate. Number 3. Ricotta pie. Ricotta pie showed up at Easter and stayed through the spring. A simple crust filled with sweetened ricotta, eggs, sugar, and a splash of vanilla or citrus zest baked until the top set and turned faintly golden. Some families added wheat berries that had been soaked for days, which was the Neapolitan tradition for pastiera. Others kept it plain. A few stirred in chocolate, though purists considered this a violation. The pie was dense, creamy, and only slightly sweet, meant to be eaten in thin slices after a heavy meal. Italian bakeries in Little Italy sold them in the weeks before Easter, and families ordered days in advance because the good ones sold out before Palm Sunday. A ricotta pie sitting on the kitchen counter, covered with a cloth towel, was a signal that the holiday had officially started. Number 2. Baked ziti. When the family had something to celebrate and no money to prove it, baked ziti appeared. Ziti pasta boiled until just short of tender, mixed with ricotta and a ladle of tomato sauce, then layered in a baking dish with slices of mozzarella and more sauce on top. Into the oven until the edges crisped and the cheese on top turned brown and blistered. It came out bubbling and steaming, and the first person to reach for a serving always burned their mouth because nobody in Little Italy had the patience to let baked ziti cool down. It was the standard dish for funerals, baptisms, confirmations, and any occasion where a crowd needed to eat and somebody had to cook with whatever was already in the kitchen. It fed a room full of people on almost nothing and made it look deliberate. Number 1. Pasta frittata, leftover spaghetti from the night before, tossed with beaten eggs and a handful of grated cheese, then pressed flat into a cast iron pan with olive oil and cooked on both sides until it formed a golden, crackling crust. Nobody called this a recipe. It was a refusal to let anything go to waste. Every Italian kitchen in Little Italy had leftover pasta sitting in a bowl on the counter. What separated an experienced cook from a careless one was knowing exactly when to flip the thing. That precise moment when the bottom had set enough to hold together but the inside was still soft. Some families folded in diced salami. Others kept it plain because the pasta and egg and cheese already did the work. Sliced into wedges, it went to job sites in a paper bag, sat on the counter for whoever came home first, and tasted the same cold as it did warm. In a neighborhood where throwing food away was the one thing nobody could afford, this dish said everything. The social clubs are closed now. Most of the tenements on Mulberry Street have turned into something else entirely. But tonight, somewhere in this country, somebody is pounding a piece of beef for braciole the same way it was done in 1935, and a cast iron pan is heating up for a pasta frittata made from whatever was left on the stove. If any of these dishes are still on your family's table, leave the name in the comments.
In a world where everybody's loud, everybody's dramatic, and everybody thinks they're the main character, one fudge had the balls to admit it. Introducing Harlow Blonde's Platinum Heat Fudge. Sweet, bold, and just unstable enough to keep things interesting. This ain't your grandmother's church bake sale fudge, sweetheart. No, no, no. This right here, this is white chocolate luxury with a dangerous personality disorder. Smooth platinum fudge, swirled with raspberry champagne reduction, because regular raspberries are for quitters. Then bam, a little vanilla vodka flavor sneaks in the back door like bad decisions after midnight. And just when you think, wow, this is classy, here comes the crunch. Crushed sugar glass candy. Because every diva needs sparkle, attitude, and emotional property damage. But don't get comfortable, kid. See that little heat finish? That subtle cayenne kick? Yeah, that's the part where Harlow smiles at you while verbally destroying your entire bloodline during a live stream. Platinum Heat. The only fudge scientifically engineered to taste like late-night chaos, old Hollywood glamour, internet drama, and somebody threatening to go live about this. Warning may cause dramatic exits, fake retirements, emotional live streams, champagne confidence, and the sudden urge to block 3 people for negative energy. Do not consume while emotionally stable. Harlow Blonde's Platinum Heat, handle with attitude. Only from Bambi's Sugar Syndicate. Where the fudge got more personality than half the internet. And trust me, if she offers you a second piece, say yes carefully.
How'd that cross necklace get over your horns? You know the saying, I bet you be sweating like a whore in church, spending too much time, try to hide behind the Bible. Get in front of it, find out that Jesus was a foreigner. Virgin Mary, you would've deported her. Not before your husband found out she was a minor, he'd have ordered her. Him and his buddies would've recorded her, transported her, extorted her, and then sent her to the coroner. You don't get to pray for me. You won't bless your heart out of this one. I know that your hate runs deep. God is probably tired of getting name dropped by fake Christians. You don't get to pray for me. You won't bless your heart out of this one. I know that your hate runs deep. God is probably tired of getting name dropped by fake Christians. I'm pretty sure that God's annoyed of racists bringing him up. Sick of you chumps showing up to take a sip of the cup. You called the Aztec savages, but the cup, isn't it blood? Isn't the stuff symbolic? Oh, it's different, huh? Introduction to blood sacrifice. He died so you can't commit your crimes. Here's the hoping he come back to life. I can't wait to see the face on every single preacher's wife. All them secrets you've been keeping, tell me how you sleep at night. All them evil things you feeling, don't leave cause you be polite. Cause this even and the thieving ain't concealed as recondite. Only a few people know. And you know why they keep it tight. You don't get to pray for me. You won't bless your heart out of this one. I know that your hate runs deep. God is probably tired of getting name dropped by fake Christians. You don't get to pray for me. You won't bless your heart out of this one. I know that your hate runs deep. God is probably tired of getting name dropped by fake Christians. Weaponized all of it, don't know what a proverb is. Cherry picking Bible scripts, oh my God. Arrogance, lying in the Lord names ain't honoring. Pride leading the blind again, oh my God. You must be drunk off the blood of Christ. Or maybe you just back hitting the hooch again. Or back to cosplaying a hooligan. The grip, the cross, to get the dollars like what? Now you forgot where you and your hoochie been? You don't get to pray for me. You won't bless your heart out of this one. I know that your hate runs deep. God is probably tired of getting name dropped by fake Christians. You don't get to pray for me. You won't bless your heart out of this one. I know that your hate runs deep. God is probably tired of getting name dropped by fake Christians.